So I just want to go over, I'm sure lots of you have been in Zoom world plenty by now, but I just want to go over some general guidelines for our night. So you can utilize the chat box for questions and comments. When we're in the general room, you can send it to everyone, or if you have a question for a specific person, you can click on who you want to send that. If there are questions that we can't answer right now, we'll follow up with an email during or after the session. And if you can keep yourself muted to reduce that background noise, that will help. And I'll show on the next slide how to raise your hand if you are wanting to ask a question or clarify any points. And then, yeah, so this is a fun space tonight. So if you could just be respectful with your comments and any feedback you have, and just have fun tonight. We are excited to be able to connect with you, even if it's just virtually. So let me show you. So this is what your screen would look like. So at the bottom, there's a participants button. If you click on that, then there's an option to click to raise your hand. So that's the option you'd use if you have a question for in a specific section. And then when we aren't sharing, or when we aren't having a presentation up on the screen, you can change to speaker view to have the one speaker kind of central on your screen. And that was my cat.
All right, love the cat making an appearance. Okay, so you guys just heard from Erica, our community engagement intern. Welcome, I'm Elisa Archer, the Executive Director of Cascade Volunteers. Very excited that you all are joining us here tonight. And in order of appearance this evening, we have everybody who will be speaking. So we have Dave Warnock, our forest supervisor, will be coming up next to chat with you guys a little bit about volunteering on the Willamette National Forest. Omero Torres is the Recreation Heritage Lands, Minerals, and Partnerships Staff Officer. Say that one 5 times fast. For the Willamette National Forest, and he's going to be chatting about volunteerism and shared stewardship and the Forest Service in general. We have Joan from Public Affairs, who is going to be talking a little bit about media requests and how to respond to those sorts of inquiries as a volunteer. And then we are hopefully going to be jumping into our breakout rooms if we have enough folks joining us tonight. And in each of the breakout rooms, we have different facilitators for different program areas. So we have Jason McIntyre with Heritage, Eric Jonas with Wilderness Trails, and Becky Hope is joining us from the Emerald Empire chapter of the Backcountry Horsemen. So with that, next slide, and let's have Dave Warnock kick us off.
Thanks, Elisa. Yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Dave Warnock. I'm the Forest Supervisor of the Willamette National Forest. And, you know, I'll just start by saying what a difference a year makes. Elisa, it was a year ago now when we were really just trying to think about and negotiate, you know, how and if we were going to be able to have a volunteer program on the Willamette National Forest. You know, we didn't know a lot about COVID-19 and how to effectively manage transmission, and we didn't know that in our society at that point, much less how to keep each other safe while out, you know, doing volunteer work on the national forest. And we did the best that we could at that point. You know, we took all of the information that was available, whether it was from the CDC or local health authorities, and we made a decision that yes, this is important work, and we believe that we can do it safely with a few mitigations, right? And we took that bold step. I felt good about it. I felt good about it because we had some controls in place and we had some deliberate planning around that, you know. And I'm just really pleased with how that worked, and I really want to thank Cascade volunteers as well as all the individual volunteers and different volunteer groups who were really diligent about their personal protective equipment use, the COVID mitigations, and we were able to have a really safe season and did some really accomplish some really good work out there on the landscape. So thank you for that. Looking forward to another good, effective year out on the Willamette with our volunteer programs. And, I think that the best is yet to come, right? For both our program as well as the benefits out there on the landscape. I wanted to finally share with you that, over the past several years, I would say the Forest Service has really tried to focus in and distill the things that are important to us as an agency, right? What are our core values as an agency that we share? And it really came down to 5 core values for us. One is diversity. Another one is interconnectedness. Another one is safety. Then conservation and service is the last one. And so when I was thinking about, talking with volunteers tonight, I just really believe that our volunteer program and the individuals who make up that volunteer program really do live these values. They share these values with the Forest Service. And I think that that's what makes it such a strong partnership, right? We have a diverse field of volunteers that come and contribute and we all learn from and we grow from, right? We are interconnected. Between our volunteers and employees and our shared concern and care for this landscape. We're interconnected. We share that value of safety. None of us wants to have an accident out there, and because there's a lot of things that come along with that, right? And we all want to stay safe and we want to keep each other safe. Our value of conservation, I think, is one of our anchors, right? We're all anchored to that idea of conserving wild places and conserving special places for generations to come to enjoy. And then the final one is service. I've seen that service ethic. I've seen it on behalf of volunteers and employees alike, and I think that really binds us as well. So, with that, I just want to say that really looking forward to another successful year working with volunteers here on the Willamette, and I'm at your service. So thank you, Elisa.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for jumping on, and thank you for your support of Forest Volunteers. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, Erica. All right, so who is Cascade Volunteers? So just to introduce us, Cascade Volunteers is the 501c3 nonprofit Friends Group partner of the Willamette National Forest. So we are embedded in the Willamette National Forest office. Generally, you can see that we're all still working from home now, and we administer volunteers with the Forest Service in a very close partnership. Our mission is to connect individuals and communities to the Willamette National Forest and adjacent public lands through programs, stewardship, and education. Next slide. All right, so what do we actually do as an embedded Friends Group partner? Like I said, that first core thing that we're working on is volunteer admin. So you guys, when you go tonight, after you get all fired up about volunteering and you get into Better Impact and you fill out that Forest Service volunteer application, one of our volunteer coordinators will contact you, talk to you more about your interests, help you fill out that individual volunteer agreement. That volunteer agreement is between you and the forest, and we will manage that paperwork. We help with volunteer training, we coordinate programs, so many more things to make sure that you feel supported as a volunteer and that your skills are being used out on your public lands. We also fund projects and programs on the forest. So we write grants in partnership with the forest. We have various agreements. We solicit donations, and we also work with donors on major gifts. And the third thing that we are really passionate about with the forest is just connecting the community to their public lands. So with that in mind, I think last year was a little bit different, but we are going to be having a lot more events out in the community. Coming up, for example, we have one at Oakshire in June, where we'd love for you to join us and talk about public land stewardship over a pint of beer, having some speaker series where rangers are sharing their insights and their knowledge with members of the community and getting them excited about conservation. We do a lot of coordination with the tourism industry lately. If you've heard of the Mackenzie Regenerative Travel Project, we've been working with some outfitter guides to bring people from Portland on inclusive trips, and they're staying in the Mackenzie corridor, and all of the money they're paying for these trips is going to support those local lodging facilities and restaurants. And then we're also engaging them in stewardship while they travel. So those are kind of how we sort of bridge that gap between the community and public lands there. Next slide. So why volunteer on the forest? I feel like for me, this is a question that is just, what, how are you asking that? But it's a great thing to chat about. So first of all, you're gonna join, like Dave said, a great group of inclusive and wonderful people who really care about their public lands and about making a difference in their community. It also just, if you're being a little selfish, it feels really good, right? To go out and spend a day out on the trail and get dirty, especially if you're someone like me that works at a computer. I try to have a field day at least once every few months so that I can have something tangible at the end of my workday, rather than just maybe an email inbox that got a little less full. And also just to kind of share your passion for Oregon and its forests and public lands. You're going to be out there with a lot of like-minded individuals who really care about the wild and special places that make Oregon so unique. So anyone over the age of 18 can volunteer on the National Forest. If you are under the age of 18, you can still participate. You will just have to have definitely that individual volunteer agreement with parent consent. And your parent may need to be with you, or a responsible adult will be with you while you are actively volunteering on the forest. A few perks. I know this is the reason some of you guys are here tonight. So you will get a Northwest Forest Pass for volunteering. These are the passes that go in your car that are good on national forest lands. That's for 16 hours of service or more. If you did it in 2020, you would be about to receive a pass now in 2021. So it'll always be the next year. For volunteering 40 hours or more in support of wilderness areas, you will be receiving a wilderness permit. So again, that is going to be active hours in wilderness areas on the Willamette or Deschutes, or volunteer service in support of those wilderness areas on the Willamette or Deschutes. And again, that'll be if you are out there volunteering this summer and you get your 40 hours in wilderness, you're going to get that award pass the following year in 2022. If you hit that 250-hour mark, which we have a surprising dedicated number of folks who do every year, you will get the America the Beautiful Pass. That's the federal lands pass that gets you into any national park or any federal lands in the country. Another perk is getting certifications in chainsaw, crosscut, CPR, first aid. We do our best to get those free for our volunteers. Sometimes there is a cost involved, but if there is, we always try to write grants and offset that if possible. And we do have annual volunteer appreciation events that all of our volunteers are invited to. Next slide. All right, and now we are going to have Omera Torres jump on and chat a little bit about stewardship in the National Forest System and just the importance of shared stewardship to the Forest Service.
Great, thank you, Elisa. So I'm Omera Torres. I'm the Forest, Recreation, Heritage, Lands, Minerals, and Partnership Staff Officer, and just want to talk to you a little bit about volunteering with the Forest Service and about the agency itself. So next slide, please. So the agency mission is to sustain the health, diversity, productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. So that in itself is quite a daunting task, and that's something that we can't do alone. So really rely on support from volunteers to help us execute the work that we do on the ground. And it's also, as Elisa mentioned before, it's a really good way to connect with your public lands. These are your public lands that we have the privilege of stewarding. So it's great to do that together. It allows folks to really understand what the agency does, and we can have more advocates for public lands and stewardship to just spread the message and the importance of public lands and the role of nature in our daily lives. And so all of that just strengthens the ability for us to do our work. It helps us have safe and healthy recreation opportunities, for example, having folks out there help us out with maintaining trails. It just makes everything just a really good opportunity for our communities. And the role of volunteers has really been critical in helping us execute that mission. So since 1972, we've had over 3 million volunteers and service participants, providing over 130 million hours of service to the agency. So that is pretty huge. Next slide. So the agency, gosh, it started off in 1905. And so we've been around for quite some time. And with that, a lot of the forests are on the Western US. So kind of as just a little bit of Forest Service history for you here. 100 years or more after we had the US, a lot of that population was on the East Coast. So therefore you had more open lands on the kind of west of the Mississippi. So that's where you'll find a lot of the forests. So we do have 155 national forests and 20 national grasslands. And that covers 44 states, as well as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And so the way we're set up, we have 9 regions. There is no region 7, but 9 regions. And each region has several forests that make up those regions. And so for us, we're in region 6, which is the Pacific Northwest region, which makes up Washington and Oregon. And again, the importance of our national forests and grasslands, 20% of the US water supply originates on forest lands. And we are the single most important source of water in the US. And so the agency was originally developed to help ensure that we are managing for clean water and our timber program, lots of trees out there. And so that's why you also find us under the Department of Agriculture because of those trees. But we also do several other things. I kind of learned what we would call the five W's. So wood, water, wildlife, and then recreation, which is recreation, and range, which is range. So range management. We have lots of forage for cattle and sheep. And then there's also other programs that have come on board over the years. So definitely a fire program. We have cultural resources and lands, special uses for things like managing utility corridors and lots of other uses, outfitter guides, and lots of other opportunities. The Forest Service also has kind of 3 branches in a sense. So what you are most familiar with is the National Forest System, all the national forests and grasslands that we manage, state and private forestry, which provides technical and financial assistance to state forestry organizations and private landowners. They also help oversee our firefighting and prevention activities. And then there's research and development. And a lot of behind the scenes work happens through research and development. Next slide, please. And so there's lots of pathways to volunteering. And so, you can, as Elisa covered, you can volunteer individually, working through Cascade Volunteers, or you can also find another group, and even Cascade Volunteers can put you in touch with another group, depending on like where you live and what your interests are, because we are just fortunate to have lots of other volunteer organizations to help us maintain our trails and help us out with other work that we do in carrying out our mission. And really, volunteering is for everyone. So if you're, no matter the age in a sense, and if you're a student, there's opportunities for pretty much everybody, all ages and abilities. So there's outdoor opportunities as well as indoor opportunities. So whatever your interest might be, there's usually something we can find that really fits your interest and abilities, what you're comfortable with doing. There's also opportunities if you already have an organization, maybe through work or through your church group or something like that. If you want to find volunteer opportunities, projects for those, for the groups that you are associated with, we can work with you and Cascade Volunteers to find something that'll fit that. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, volunteering is for everyone, and there are some basic qualifications. So, anyone can volunteer. Minors do need parental consent, and we do have volunteer agreements. So, depending on the project at hand, there could be some qualifications on there. So, but for the most part, there's going to be a project where you don't need any experience, and that's the great thing about volunteering is. You just need that volunteer agreement. Safety is of utmost importance to us. So we're gonna give you that safety, the safety briefings, the on-the-job training to show you how to do the work and do it safely and do it the correct way. And so with that training, we're going to give you the on-the-job training. We're going to provide you with personal protective equipment. So whether it's gloves or a hard hat, eye protection, all that stuff, anything that you need to do the job safely, we'll ensure that you have the right gear. We also, as I mentioned, we take safety very seriously. So we do take the time to put together job hazard analysis or risk assessments just to evaluate, what are the things that are important to do the job correctly and do it safely and avoid any serious injuries, things like that. So a lot of work goes into that, and so we give you the training to be able to do those things properly. And then we also have field protocols. So when you're going out in the field, there's been a lot of work that goes into getting that project ready and notifying all the right people, to be able to get the work done on the ground. And then there's other pieces, the timekeeping and accomplishments. It's just important that you track your time, that you document that, and then you report it. That helps you out if you would like to get, say, one of those Northwest Forest passes. It also helps out the agency and Cascade Volunteers by showing that, we had this number of hours to do all this work on the ground. So that really helps us tell our story and really showcase the work that you're doing on the ground and show the value of our accomplishments and benefits of working together. And then, let's see, there's also expenses and reimbursements. So that's kind of on a case-by-case basis. So not everything's eligible, but that is a little perk as well. Sometimes we do have the ability to provide some reimbursements on certain things. So on that one, that's just best worked out between you and whoever you're working with, your representative or supervisor, whether it's directly with the Forest Service or through Cascade Volunteers. And then that uniform piece. So the important thing about that is, you may or may not have a uniform, but the important thing is that you're representing somebody. You're obviously representing yourself. You're representing the organization that you're with. Perhaps it's Cascade Volunteers, and you're representing the forest, the Willamette National Forest, and the Forest Service. So, it's just really important that we're mindful and of the work that we're doing and how we represent ourselves and the folks that we're working with in the agency. Let's see, next slide, please. And as Dave mentioned, he went over some of the core values. So that's really important to us. So, aside from doing the work and doing it safely, we just want to ensure that you have a really good time, a really good experience, and that you want to come back again and do it again, and that you're going to have such a good time that you're going to tell your friends about it, you're going to tell your family about it, and encourage them to share in similar experiences. And so, with that, through as an agency, we prohibit any sort of discrimination. I'm not going to read through the full statement, but obviously that's important to us and our partners. So diversity, equity, inclusion, those are values that we hold very close to us. And that's all part of that interdependence. And just as nature, a diverse ecosystem is a sign of health and optimum capacity, and we have similar values. We think, with people as well. So, and with that, yeah, I think that's pretty much a good summary of the agency and some of the opportunities available to volunteers. Next slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Omero. And now we are going to have Joan from Public Affairs jump on and chat a little bit about what to do if you get media requests. Maybe you're in a high public contact volunteer position. Maybe you are out doing some trailhead hosting on some of our wilderness trails that now have permits, and a member of the media comes up to you. How can you respond to those types of requests as a volunteer?
Hello and good evening, everybody. You can go ahead and go to the first slide. My name is Joni Schmidgall, and I'm the acting public affairs staff officer on the Willamette National Forest. And I wanted to talk with you about a couple of different things tonight. First, I want to pick up where Omero left off with a little bit of a geographical orientation to the forest and just where we are in time and space. And then just to touch briefly on some of the issues and themes and just things that we deal with on an almost daily basis. We have so many different resources and interests here on the forest. And then, as Elisa mentioned, I want to touch on media and social media. So next slide, please. So the slide that Omero showed with all of the different regions, this map here zooms down just into region 6, which is Oregon and Washington. And we have 16 national forests, 2 national scenic areas, a national grassland, 2 volcanic national monuments, a research station, and our regional office is in Portland. So we just have this diverse range of forests and of landscapes, and some of these forests provide a lot of timber, some of them provide a lot of grazing, and it's very diverse in Oregon and Washington. Next slide, please. Zooming into the Willamette National Forest, which is where we're at, we have 4 ranger districts, and those ranger districts comprise 1.6 million acres. So we're not the biggest national forest, but we are one of the biggest. And we're 110 miles long, and within our national forest, there are 8 wilderness areas. And we have a really interesting position. We are on the western slopes of the Cascades. So as we say, we're the wet side of the Cascades because we get a lot more rain than our neighbors to the east, which is the Deschutes National Forest. And we have a lot of beautiful landscapes here. And even in our national forest, in our 1.6 million acres, we still have a lot of diversity with a lot of landscapes. And so there's a whole variety of places and areas that you could be volunteering. And I have a feeling that an experience that one person may have is completely different than an experience you may have. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key components of management on the national forest. And we keep talking about that keyword diversity. And I mean, on the Willamette, we really do have it all. We have timber and recreation. We have natural resources and wildlife, including endangered species like the spotted owl and salmon. We have fire, which I'll touch on in a little bit more depth in a minute. We've got water and tourism, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, so many more people pushed outside, which is wonderful, but it also puts a strain on our resources and our people to meet this demand. So it's awesome that we have these volunteers, but with the difference, with the increase in visitation on our forest, it also means that the public visiting our national forest is different. And on the slide, I mean, that this is just a sample of the different components and the different resources that we have to think about, but every single one of these is going to be important, more important even than everything else to different people. And some of these resources might even seem like they might conflict, like you know, how can you have timber management and healthy waterways? Well, you know what, we can, because we manage for all of these. And as Mero mentioned in his talk, that we really mention we manage for the greater good, and we manage a multitude of resources for a multitude of people of diverse backgrounds, opinions, and values. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, fire has been something that was just overwhelmingly impactful last year. And I really wanted to bring this up because these fires are still so fresh on the minds of our public. And maybe there's even some of you that want to volunteer who were impacted by the fires last year. And we had 176,000 acres. This is just on the Willamette National Forest. These fires were much bigger, but 176,000 acres between the Beachy Creek, Lions Head, and Holiday Farm fires. And so this map is the same map that I used earlier, but with the fire footprints overlaid. And the Detroit Ranger District and the Santiam Canyon had the most devastating impacts because of Beachy Creek and Lions Head. And then the Holiday Farm fire impacted the McKenzie River area just to the east of Eugene. And within these burn areas, hundreds of homes and businesses were destroyed. This includes Forest Service employees. There's people who lived in these areas for literally their entire lives and have recreated on the forest. And so a lot of our public is really dealing with the loss of these special places, and also with a loss of access. And there have been huge impacts to recreation, and we have large closures on the forest that are going to remain in place for some time. And as we've been telling people, the size of these fires was absolutely unprecedented. And so our response and our restoration and our repair work is also at a huge scale, and it's a scale that we've never undertaken before. And so this is a common theme that we are hearing from the public, is that people, you know, have experienced the loss and they're sad, but they're also frustrated that, you know, these fires happened last fall. Why can't I go camping in my favorite place yet? Or why can't I go mushroom hunting? That's a big one. But there's a whole safety component to these fires. And I don't want to go too much into detail with that, because I know that you'll have training if you're volunteering in a place where you could end up talking about these fires. But I just wanted to bring this to your awareness that this is really I want to say a hot topic, no pun intended, right now, and something that is very much on the minds of the employees and the public that you could be dealing with this summer. Next slide, please. So moving on to what your responsibilities may be interacting with the public as a volunteer. First of all, we expect you to be professional and to be welcoming. And that's, I think, what a lot of these positions will entail, is just being a good host and helping people to feel welcome in the National Forest. We have the word neutral here, and I'll talk a little bit about this on the next slide, but with neutral, we really mean that we want you to be aware of your own biases and to overcome them. We want you to be open and accepting of every different opinion and value, even if you don't agree with it. If you are volunteering with us in this official capacity, and especially if you're wearing a Forest Service uniform, it's really important that you remain unbiased and that you are just accepting of an opinion or a viewpoint that might be different from yours. As Omera mentioned, we are a harassment-free workplace, and that is something that we take very, very seriously, both with our employees and our volunteers. And so if you have any issues, we encourage you to speak up. And I, as someone who hasn't worked for the Forest Service as long as some people, but I have worked for this agency for over 10 years now, I really have seen a culture shift. We value people speaking up. And if they feel uncomfortable, then they need to say something. And the biggest thing to remember is when you're a volunteer, you represent the Forest Service. And if you're wearing a uniform and if you're interacting with the public, they don't know the difference between you and Dave Warnock, our forest supervisor. You are someone in a green pickle suit who has cool information and they probably want to talk to you. So you just need to keep that in mind when you're a volunteer, that this agency is so much bigger than all of us. Next slide, please. Another important component with public interactions is to understand your limitations, and talking all day and interacting with the public can sometimes be exhausting. But we really encourage you as a volunteer to be proactive and to ask for help if you need it. And with most of these volunteers, you're coming in to, in some ways, add extra capacity for us, or to help us as Forest Service employees reach communities or people that we wouldn't normally be able to. And so we are more than happy to help if you ever are feeling overwhelmed or if you need a little bit of a break. And it's totally okay if the public asks you a question, if you say, I don't know. The most important thing is that you know where to find the information, or you can help the public look it up. You can give the, or put them in touch with someone who might know the information. And it is funny, and we talk a lot as Forest Service employees how, again, if you're wearing a uniform, the public doesn't know who you are. They don't know if you have a specialty. They just think, oh, you know everything about the trees and the animals and the trails, but really we don't. But it's knowing who to ask, and it's knowing where to go for help. As we said, don't burn yourself out. We are so happy that you're here to help us and to hopefully volunteer, but we want you to have fun, and we don't want this to be stressful. And also, we want you to be safe and to always put your safety first, and your coworkers and that of the public. And so with safety and with a COVID environment, it really adds a different spin on it. And I know that Elisa and the volunteers and our rec folks have done a really good job of making sure that COVID mitigations are in place, and making sure that if you feel unsafe, if you know how to tactfully and politely remove yourself from a situation, or just know when to recognize, like, okay, I need to step back, like this is unsafe. And lastly, this goes probably more at the first slide of being neutral. And it's that when you are here in an official volunteer capacity, you cannot express your personal opinion, or especially if it's a political opinion, even if asked directly. And again, that's part of being a good host. It's part of being welcoming. It's part of just creating an inclusive environment for people. And as employees, we're actually held legally to something called the Hatch Act, where we cannot advocate in any formal capacity while at work for any kind of political agenda or a certain candidate. And while our volunteers are not expressly under that same act, we really want people to refrain from any kind of political jargon or opinions while you're here as a volunteer. And it just makes it smoother and cleaner, and it just helps the public to feel more welcome. Next slide, please. And moving on to media. So we get a lot of media requests here on this national forest, and as a volunteer, you are not authorized to talk to the media unless you have permission. And this is also the same of our employees. As I mentioned, I'm the acting public affairs staff, and so all media requests should go through me. And that means if you're approached by media out in the field, which does happen sometimes, they just show up. And if someone identifies themselves as media and wants to ask you a question, you need to take down their information and pass that information along to your supervisor, who will then in turn pass it along to me. And this might seem a little overkill, but we have pretty good relationships with most of our media. And there's so many issues right now with fires. There's a lot of sensitivities, and we just want to make sure that our messaging is consistent, and that it's messaging that as an agency, as the Forest Service, it's upholding our values, it's upholding our core beliefs of land management. And so there may be a time when we do have media out to a volunteer event, and if you want to be interviewed, that's awesome. but it needs to be in an official capacity and approved by the Forest Service if you are interviewed by the media while you're volunteering. And again, if you see someone who looks like media out and about, even if they haven't identified themselves or introduced themselves, you need to tell your supervisor as soon as you can. Next slide, please. This brings me to my favorite topic, which is social media. And let me tell you, this is a whole bucket of worms when you work for the federal government. And when you're volunteering, you of course may post your own social media account. I have a personal social media account that I will sometimes take photos from the workplace and post to, but we really ask that you use good judgment when you do that. And good judgment can mean everything from, is this post appropriate? Is it offensive? Am I wearing a mask when I'm less than 6 feet away from someone? Do I have the correct PPE on? And you just need to remember that even if it's your own private account, if you post something to a social media account when you're volunteering, it represents the agency. And that can come back to have interesting implications if the post were to not use good judgment, we'll just say. And you're more than welcome to talk to me or to talk to Elisa if you ever have any questions, and we can talk you through what an appropriate post looks like, why it may or may not be a good idea to post something in particular. And social media is so tricky because it's almost evolved quicker than we can teach about it. And so I always tell people to use good judgment, and I know that that can sometimes mean different things to different people, but we have had Forest Service employees terminated for posting inappropriate or even dangerous and offensive posts on their social media accounts when they're at work. And I don't know officially what exists for volunteers, but I can imagine there are similar agreements. And once on the internet, always on the internet. Believe me, that stuff never goes away. We have a Willamette National Forest Facebook and Twitter page, and I absolutely love volunteer events. I love coming out to them, and I love pictures. So if we have events, I might show up and I might take some pictures. And if you're comfortable with it, you might show up on our social media account. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned, my name is Joni Schmidgall, and I'm the Acting Public Affairs Staff Officer. I am just filling in for Tammy Robinson, who is the normal Public Affairs Staff Officer, and she will be back in her position mid-June. And so if you have any questions until mid-June, you're welcome to get a hold of me. And after that, Tammy Robinson will be your public affairs contact. Thanks. And again, just have a great summer out there volunteering. And we're so happy to have volunteers on the forest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joni and Dave and Omero. Really appreciate all of you guys giving us a nice introduction tonight. So now we're going to move on to the portion of the evening where we were going to do our fancy self-selecting breakout rooms. I think because we are kind of right on that threshold, we had a lot of folks who couldn't join us. We are just going to do the presentations to the group. We will keep them in that same order we were going to have the breakout rooms in, and we'll record the whole time because it looks like about half of our registered attendees weren't able to be on tonight, and I know they would love to hear about these volunteer opportunities. So if you can, on the right-hand top corner of your screen, this is where you'll see that speaker view option. And you can move to speaker view, and it should show you the main person who is chatting there. And Erica, can you pull up that list of the breakout rooms just so folks will know kind of what order we're going to have them in? I know first we're going to have trail maintenance and packing, and so I'll go ahead and take that room with Becky Hope talking about trail maintenance on our forest. Next up, we're going to have natural resources. We'll have Omero take that non-room, apologies, and just kind of present about natural resources. Third, you're hearing from Sarah about Interp and Ed. Then you'll hear from Eric about wilderness stewardship, and then we will move to Jason for heritage. It looks like we're doing good on time. So what we'll do is during these presentations, and you can go ahead and take that down and move it back to the speaker view, Erica, thank you. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and throw those questions into the chat. As soon as we're done chatting about the different areas, we will have Erica kind of facilitate those questions and ask them, and folks can answer them after each of those segments. All right. So I will go ahead and kick us off talking about trail stewardship. Again, I'm Elisa Archer, Executive Director of Cascade Volunteers. I'm super excited to talk about trail stewardship because that is kind of how our organization got its start. We began as a grassroots, scrappy trail group, and we have been slowly over the last couple of years transitioning into this Friends Group partner of a national forest, but we still have a huge heart for trails in this organization. So volunteers are an essential part of maintaining trails in the Willamette National Forest and have been for years. Volunteers report trail conditions, they log out trails each spring, improve drainage with all of that rain on the wet side that Joni was talking about, and so many more things out on our trails. So there are two ways that you can contribute to trail stewardship on the forest. And this is going to be kind of a repeating theme throughout these different program areas of the forest. We have direct service and we have indirect service through a partner organization. The main difference there is going to be that agreement that you're going to have. So direct service opportunities are when you are under an individual agreement directly volunteering with the forest. So we have a couple of trail crews that fall under our CV umbrella that will be engaging in direct service. So that's the Scorpion Trail Crew out of Eugene. We also have the Salamander Trail Crew out of Salem, and we have a new crew, the Camas crew, who is based out of Eugene and primarily does wilderness volunteer stewardship. And so they're out on wilderness trails and working out on those. And so the reason I'm kind of sharing my screen with you guys a little impromptu here is because I want to show you that there are so many different trail groups on our forest. If you go to our website, cascadevols.org, programs, trail maintenance, then you are going to find information about signing up to volunteer, required training and certifications, tools and supplies that you might need. This links to the different Facebook pages that our crews have. And then we also have our Greater Willamette National Forest Trail Community, and each of these organizations, ATCA in Oak Ridge, Backcountry Horsemen, Emerald Empire, who Becky is from, we link to their websites. And so this is that indirect service that I was talking about. This is working with a trusted, amazing partner organization who also coordinates volunteer activities on the district level, and they're out on the ground each summer engaging with volunteers. And so with that, I'm going to have Becky from the Emerald Empire chapter chat a little bit about what equestrian volunteer opportunities look like on the forest.
All right, I'm Becky Hope. I'm a member of the Backcountry Horsemen here in Oregon with our local chapter in Eugene of the Emerald Empire. I've got several years of experience doing trail work on multiple different national forests, but primarily we are a group of horsemen who are doing trail work to keep our ability to get out on the trails and keep the trails open. We found over the years that, you know, we all need to pitch in together and keep the trails open and keep them available for everybody. And that's the best way. So we do it two-prong. We'll be on the ground ourselves, logging out trails or fixing bridges or, you know, hardening up surfaces so that we can get on the trail fine. But we also do it by way of supporting other groups. We do a lot of wilderness pack-ins where we'll pack in other crews that are going to go in and stay in for an extended period of time. By us pack supporting them, we get them to go in for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. There are the Camas group. That's what they'll be offering, is there's the ability to go into the wilderness, be pack supported, have your gear packed in, and just stay in the wilderness for extended stays and have your gear all packed in. So that's one of the things that we make available. We pack in fish. We do other, I've packed in Forest Service folks to do studies of areas that they need to get into that can be more easily gotten into by horses with horses. We will go in certain areas, they'll need water packed in so that they can work on ridge lines, and they'll use the horses to pack in water for those areas. We do a lot of bridge material pack in and pack out. Recently, we've been packing out more bridge material than packing it in. But anyway, so whatever we can do, we have a variety of folks. Most of our groups are women. We do a lot of work with all of our women and guys that do the work. We have youth crews that go out. We take a lot of younger folks out and get them out involved and get them on the end of a crosscut. Anything else?
Yeah, I'll jump back for a second. Realized we did not chat about training. So we do run the West Cascade Skills College each spring. That is virtual this year. The PCTA is going to be putting that on, and I can send out a link after this meeting to that. That is going to be focused this year on folks who are new to trail maintenance. So they're going to have an intro to trail maintenance course and a surveying course. The courses themselves are going to be online, and then there are going to be practical field portions at various locations in the Willamette National Forest. So making it a little different, a little COVID friendly this year. But if you're interested in trail maintenance, that's a great way to get started. And also in terms of tools and supplies, you know, I will share my screen again, guys. We use Better Impact, and Becky's group does as well. So do many of our trail organizations on the Willamette National Forest, which has been fantastic. And so with Better Impact, it's really easy to say, hey, you know, I'm very interested in going out on the Separation Lake Trail this week. You can see who your crew leader is. You can see exactly where you're meeting up and what is going on. And you can email your crew leader ahead of time and say, hey, this is my first time going out on crew. You know, I don't have any supplies. And our crew leaders are absolutely fantastic. They can bring extra tools, extra PPE. They're going to make sure that you're safe. So it's really an inclusive and awesome environment. And I'll say the same for Becky's group. I've been out riding with them as somebody who hadn't ridden in 15 years, and boy, was I sore, but I felt super safe and I had a lot of fun. So just an awesome, awesome opportunity to volunteer. And if anybody has any questions about trail maintenance, I'm not seeing any in the chat, but I would invite you guys, if anybody wants to go off mute and ask a question, we can do that now. And if not, after a minute, we will go ahead and we will move on to our next category of natural resources.
I had a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was that previous slide you showed, and it had the program with the calendar of trail maintenances? What was that?
Oh, that was
My Impact?
It was, yes. That was our volunteer database and scheduling tool that we are using.
Do volunteers have access to that?
You do, absolutely. So after this meeting, I already have my email drafted to all of our attendees. I will send a direct link, and that link will take you to the Forest's volunteer application. So you'll make a Better Impact account, you'll fill out the application, and then we'll get all your paperwork underway and you'll be able to start signing up for those opportunities.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about trail maintenance, or did me and Becky just do an awesome job?
Hey, I just have a question in general, just as we're thinking through all of this and all the categories. I'm brand new to volunteering, and I'm wondering, like, what are the time commitments that are typical? Is it realistic to do one weekend every 2 months? Or, you know, like, what are you hoping for? Because that would really help me as I'm listening to all the details. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's a fantastic question. And we will have certain volunteer opportunities you're going to hear about later where we have more of a hardcore time commitment. These opportunities involve an extensive amount of training, like trailhead hosting in our wilderness areas with the permits, for example. We're going to have a definite time commitment there. With the trail work, I think that's a little more flexible. Put in some time up front. If you can attend one of those PCTA courses, fantastic. But also, if you let your crew leader know ahead of time, hey, it's my first time out, they are going to be there with you, teaching you how to work on the tread on a trail, teaching you when you're brushing, how high to be going. They're going to give you that information. And I think for trail maintenance, you know, it's a lot more flexible in terms of volunteering. You can look at that volunteer calendar and you can sign up for trips as you go along. I'm not sure, Becky, if your group has any specific time commitments. And you are on mute.
There we go. No, we run the gamut. I've got folks that come out with me every week or every other week or so that come out with me all the time. I've got one gentleman that's going to be doing bridge surveys, but then at the same time, I've got people that I only see them once a year. They come out and they'll do one weekend project. We do probably 4 or 5 3-day trips over the weekends during the summer, and they'll come out and do one of those or a couple of those, and that's it. That's their commitment for the entire year. So our group does both. That's most of the groups, the Camas, the Scorpions. You can come out one time or you can come out every week. It's your choice.
Yeah, agreed. Trail maintenance is super flexible. And I do see a question in the chat about flexibility on dates and times that crews maintain trails. I will say that currently the majority of our opportunities are during the week. Our volunteers and our volunteer crew leaders typically prefer to go out when there aren't as many visitors out, right? It makes things a lot easier, especially with COVID. But we are trying to be conscious and add more weekend trail opportunities. Trail crews do operate year round. Summer is, of course, the busier season. And in the wilderness areas, summer is, of course, the only time you're going to be getting out there because of all that snowpack. But we do have trail crews operating year round, mostly during the week, and trying to add more weekend opportunities. And I see Norris's hand up.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Do the crew leaders, are they certified in first aid?
They are,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic question. We are in the process of adopting a new volunteer operations plan forest-wide. And so that is one of the requirements, that they are certified in first aid and CPR. Many of them are also certified in chainsaw or crosscut saw as well. And those certifications require for you to have active CPR first aid. And I think the cool thing about trail stewardship is that we have a ton of people in the medical profession that are doing trail maintenance. Doctors, nurses, you name it. So I always feel really safe going out with those folks.
Thank you.
All right. So in the interest of time, let's go ahead and move on to natural resources volunteer opportunities with Omero. Take us away.
Thank you, Elisa. So as mentioned before, that Forest Service mission to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of current and future generations. And so with that, the agency is over 100 years old. And initially, our mandate was to help manage for clean water and manage those timber resources. And over the years, that expanded into a multiple use mandate. So you are going to see, obviously timber harvesting on our forest and other uses. Some forests, we don't have that big of a program, but some forests have minerals projects on their public lands. And so the natural resources program, is quite varied, and there's also a lot of restoration projects involved in that. And so natural resources encompasses, timber, aquatics, which could be hydrology and fisheries, botany, wildlife. All those fall into that natural resources program. Currently, there's 2 ways you can contribute to the program, either through direct service with the forest or with Cascade Volunteers, and also through partner organizations. So there's not a whole lot. I'll go through that right now. There's some of the direct service opportunities include tree planting events. So these normally take place in the spring or fall. And so that's kind of a one and done event. You just show up and you spend the day helping to plant trees and you call it a day. Sometimes they go for a day or 2. And when we do those, it's pretty accommodating. We're looking for large groups to try and get as many trees on the ground as possible. And as always, we provide the PPE, we provide the training. And, just kind of taking a little tangent here. So, Norris had asked about crew leaders. So that's one thing, we always train the folks that are volunteering. And then when we have crew leaders, we make sure that the crew leaders are trained to not just do that task, but to have some leadership experience, leadership training, have the first aid CPR. So you can always know that the person that you're working next to, they've all been trained, and the person that's leading you has had the benefits of leadership training and communications, making sure that there's a way to contact a dispatcher or somebody that, if there's ever a need for help and all that. So yeah, really, really safe operations that way. Let's see. And so, so for signing up for things such as tree planting opportunities, that's going to be through that Better Impact database. And there's also invasive weed surveying. That's a big one, and always opportunities for those. Invasive weeds are it's a pretty important program on the forest because yeah, there's just lots of diversity and good habitats out there. So invasive weeds can really affect not just our native plants, but also native animals. And so, that's just one that we always try to keep in check. But it's kind of like whack-a-mole. So there's always a need for it because you pull weeds out somewhere and you're going to find them somewhere else. So always looking for help with that. And, so we're also utilizing the latest and greatest technology. So this is kind of a simple one too. There is some training involved, to get to know the plants that, so you make sure that the plant that you're going to pull is in fact a noxious weed. And so we also have smartphone apps that you can go out there and help to identify where the weeds are located, and then we can come up with the plan of attack, how to respond to that area with volunteers and all that, and make a project out of it. Let's see. There's also just other opportunities, kind of single opportunities. So with all these programs, sometimes, we don't like our own employees when we can help it to go out alone. And sometimes it might just be that they just need somebody to go out with them. So that way it's always safer to travel in pairs. So it could be an opportunity that you have a chance to go out there and help out with some sort of survey, whether it's counting fish or some other survey. And so it's going to be a good day in the field. And then the other opportunities are with partnership organizations. So there are watershed councils that help to improve our forest waterways, and pretty much every district. So the Willamette National Forest, we have 4 ranger districts. The Detroit Ranger District, obviously out of Detroit, Sweet Home Ranger District out of Sweet Home, the McKenzie River Ranger District, and then the Middle Fork District out of the Oak Ridge area. And so with each of those, there's typically a watershed council that kind of helps to focus on those areas. So they always have events going on, well, not always, but they have scheduled events throughout the year that there's opportunities to volunteer with them as well. And so some of those include the McKenzie River Trust, the South Standing Watershed Council, and others. And then the other thing I was going to mention is just kind of a shout out as well to Cascade volunteers, because although there's not a lot of opportunities right now, natural resources, there's the tree planting, invasive weeds, and then just the individual ones that I mentioned. All this that you're watching and listening to today, Cascade volunteers was really, to this extent, we signed our agreement with them in 2019. So within 2 years, this is where we're at, and it's just amazing that we've gotten this far. So, natural resources and other topics that you'll hear about today, those are continuing to grow. So as we see the need and opportunities and interest from volunteers, and the ability to start developing that with our forest as well, it takes our folks to put some resources into it to work with Cascade volunteers and get some of these projects off the ground. So as all that develops, there'll be more and more opportunities in the future. So yeah, thank you for that.
Awesome. So do we have any NR related questions? Natural resources, get you Forest Service volunteers used to the acronyms because there are so many of them to learn. Any questions about NR? I will say, if you're interested in that invasive weed removal program, when you do fill out your volunteer application, just indicate training needed, and I will see that in the database, and I'll let you know we're going to have a training coming up soon to get folks ready for the summer season. And so we do work in wilderness areas for those invasive weeds, and we have folks assigned to a specific trail that they'll do where they're mapping out those weeds with the app and reporting it back to a botanist. All right, awesome. Thank you, Omero. Let's go ahead and move on to room number 3, which I believe is education and interp. So Sarah and Chloe, if you'd like to jump on.
Thanks, Al. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Spoden. I am the Education and Interpretation Coordinator here with Cascade Volunteers. I'm fairly new. I think this is week 2. I'm happy to be here. And I am currently brought on board to help with this multi-phase project along the Santiam Wagon Road Trail. And currently we are gathering lots of data and seeing what we can do along this historic trail interp-wise. And hopefully by next year, we will implement some actual education and interpretation along the trail. But Chloe is also here with us, and I'll have her introduce herself. And I think we're both really avid lovers of education and interpretation. I think the Forest Service, its mission really aligns with education, conservation, and opportunities to engage with the public in an interpretive and meaningful way through different programs and trail walks, etc. All are really valuable for both the Forest Service and through just community in general. So we're excited about programs to come. Some of them were, I believe, on hold because of COVID, and we're just looking to see where that can take us and hear about maybe some exciting things that maybe volunteers are interested in getting involved with. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Chloe.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Chloe Goldine-Holbrook. I work on the Middle Fork District. I'm the Developed and Dispersed Recreation Manager. But I've got a good background in doing a lot of education and interp type work. So I really have a passion for it. And it's something that we have kind of dabbled in on the forest, and we have a little bit, but it's something that I think we see a big area of improvement, of more positions that could be available. But because it's something that is new, a lot of it is going to be driven by what your interests are. So, where are your passions? What type of interp or education work do you want to work with school groups? Do you want to work with the public? Do you want to do it formally? Do you want to leave guided tours, on a particular topic? Do you want to do it just once a summer? Do you want to do it every week? I think there's a lot of kind of open opportunities dependent upon what your interests are and what your background is too, and what your comfortability is with doing these types of programs. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about this type of work in particular is that it's, open to anyone, regardless of your, sort of physical capabilities. So if you can, talk to people and enjoy doing that, it's going to be a really neat thing to do. And it's especially depending on where you're going to be and what type of work, we could be doing campfire programs and campgrounds. And then there's also like an interpretive media aspect of it too. So looking at, improving some of our interpretive signs, if you have a graphic design background or any sort of design interests, that's something that there's also a need on the forest to kind of look at that and critically look at what we have and help improve some of that infrastructure, or maybe some of the brochures and media that we have. So yeah, this is an interesting one with opportunity, because it's going to be a lot, kind of driven by your own skills and interests, and what you'd like to do. Yeah, do you have anything else to add, Sarah?
No, yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pop my email in the chat. If anyone is interested, and you can go ahead and contact me. And also I'll point back to that application just in the notes, if this is your passion and this is a skill that you have, please make a note in the Better Impact application about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah and Chloe. And like they said, this is a growth area for us. So we're super excited. In general, interpretive volunteer opportunities, you're usually looking at like maybe a half day, kind of a shorter shift. You may be required to wear a uniform, specifically if you're leading interpretive hikes. And then a lot of the stuff that Joni was talking about, representing the agency when you're wearing that uniform especially, is very important. So with that in mind, and the fact that it's really new, I would say if you have any interests, please email Sarah, let her know, and also indicate that on that application in Better Impact. I'll send out the link after this. Are there any general questions about interpretive volunteer opportunities, or maybe the Santiam Wagon Road project, which is kind of how we're kicking this off? And Norris, I see your hand. Go for it.
The Santiam Wagon project. This is new to me. Can you just give a brief explanation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Santiam Wagon Road is a historic Oregon trail. Actually went from the west to the east. It was used to take cattle from the Willamette Valley back over to Bend area. And so this wagon road covers, land in the forest and some private land. It's really a mix. There's not good signage on the road. It can be hard to find the wagon road if folks try to do the entirety. So we kicked off a multi-year project to better map the road with GPS, to revamp the interpretive plan, which is what Sarah is really kicking off with. And so as part of that interpretive plan revamping, Sarah is convening a committee to look at the interpretive plan that was created maybe 10 years ago and kind of update it with some newer information, and also is going to be doing some ethnographic information gathering. And so that's an area where I think volunteers would be incredibly useful. This kind of falls into the heritage realm a little bit. Everything is so interconnected. But chatting with folks whose ancestors traveled on the Santiam Wagon Road and getting that information from them, conducting interviews, would be a tremendous help and an awesome thing to do as a volunteer. So that's going to be something important to look forward to coming in the future. And then all of that information gathering in that committee is going to revamp the interpretive plan that will then feed some specific interpretive hikes that are going to be developed by Sarah and then led by volunteers eventually. So we're at the early stages of this project and just kind of looking out at the future and looking for volunteers who like education and public speaking and who have an interest in history.
Sounds great. Good luck.
And yes, I saw the question in the chat box about sending out resources. We will send this out after the email, all the links to things that we have shown. All right, so with that, let us move on to our next, the room that I know many of you are excited about, wilderness areas. Eric Jonas is here with us. And if you could jump on, Eric, and chat a little bit about wilderness volunteer opportunities in the Willamette National Forest.
I just want to know who isn't excited about wilderness, right? That's what we're here for tonight, right? There are so many opportunities on the forest, and I appreciate all the other presenters tonight. Everybody did a fabulous job. Elisa, thank you for what you've done. This is great. My name is Eric Jonas, and I am the Wilderness Trails and Winter Recreation Manager on the Detroit and Sweet Home districts. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about wilderness. So what is wilderness? If we were in a live chat, in fact, we've been listening to us an awful lot tonight. Can I get one of our guests to chime in and tell me in 3 sentences or less, what is wilderness? Don't be shy. There's no
It's
wrong.
wild.
All right, good. Wilderness is wild. Anything else? All right, I'll take it from here then. So honestly, there is really, no one has written it better or more beautifully, I think, than actually the founders of the Wilderness Act of 1964. They did a beautiful job of putting together legislation. Everybody agreed on this legislation. It was voted for almost unanimously. There was one person who didn't sign this bill, and he didn't sign it because he didn't think that it went far enough to protect wilderness. So I appreciate those folks and those pioneers that put that time and effort into preserving the wilderness as we know it today. So the Wilderness Act says that wilderness, in contrast to those areas where man and his works dominate the landscape, is hereby recognized as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. An area of wilderness is further defined to mean, in this act, an area of undeveloped federal land retaining its primeval character and influence without permanent improvements or human habitation, which is protected and managed so as to preserve the natural conditions. And in the next paragraph, I really think gives me the entire summary when I meet folks in the wilderness and we're discussing what wilderness is. And if you were to ask me wilderness, this is what I would tell you, is that wilderness is a place that is to appear as though it's affected primarily by the forces of nature and not the hand of human beings. So that's what we want to do. We want to preserve wilderness. We want to preserve wilderness character. We want to provide excellent opportunities for solitude. And anybody have, so here's another question. Don't everybody step on each other here answering this one. How many wildernesses are there on the Willamette National Forest? So there's several wilderness areas throughout the country. How many do we have on the Willamette National Forest?
65.
Very close, very close. Anyone else?
20.
Much closer. One more guess.
We need more. That's all I got to say.
You're not going to get an argument from me. So there are 8 wildernesses on the Willamette National Forest, and they are the Opal Creek Wilderness, the Mount Jefferson Wilderness, the Middle Santiam Wilderness, the Menagerie Wilderness, and those are the 4 actually that I manage in the Detroit and Sweet Home districts. And then the McKenzie River Ranger District has Mount Washington and the Three Sisters Wilderness. And the Middle Fork has Waldo Lake and Diamond Peak Wildernesses. And I think that composes of almost 400,000 acres, I believe. I don't have the number directly in front of me here.
How does the Willamette Forest rank as the number of wilderness areas compared to other Oregon forests?
I would say we probably have the most wilderness areas of other Oregon forests. I don't have that one off. That's a great question. I don't have that one on the top of my head. So tonight I'm here to talk about, why it's important to protect wilderness and why your role as a volunteer is so important, and what we need to do to carry on this mission that our forefathers have commissioned us with. So as we know, it's getting more and more popular. Someone's already talked about that. There's been a huge surge of visitor use due to COVID, and before that ever happened, outdoor use was already skyrocketing. And then you keep up, 300 million people cooped up in their houses for 6 months, and all of a sudden you let them out. Everyone wants to just get outside, right? And so the use isn't going to diminish because there's a lot of people who discovered the forest and they discovered their public lands in this process. Maybe in their past, they didn't do these activities because they were quarantined, they didn't know where to start, but they've done it now. They've gotten the bug just like the rest of us have. And they are here to stay. And we encourage that. But the unfortunate side effect is when we have a lot of new people, even I can point back to myself. When I first started visiting the National Forest, And like many visitors, they just don't have the wilderness skills or the backcountry or just outdoor skills in general. And with skills, I would say ethic go hand in hand. So when you're new and you're just discovering this wonderful place, you really don't know much about it. And because maybe you don't know what gear to bring or how to plan for it or what to expect, you're going to have a heavier impact on the land and on that landscape. So as folks become more and more familiar with it, and they develop a deeper love for the wilderness, and their skill level starts going up, they have a much lighter impact. So what we're dealing with right now is we have just so many people that are just brand new outdoor and wilderness users, and they just need to know how to take care of the land and how to be good stewards. They just don't know yet. And that's where we come in, where we can educate them. And I find in most cases, most folks really want to do the right thing. They just don't know what the right thing is to do. And there's some people who know the right thing, but they don't know why it's the right thing. And once you explain it to them, they're completely on board. Most folks want to keep these places beautiful. So we have different opportunities. We have different trail crews. I'm going to underscore this one this year. Trail crews and wilderness trail crews this year are going to be so busy. So our employees, well, first of all, we don't have the funding to have enough employees to do all of the trail work anyway. And so we have really depended on and leaned on volunteers for this very heavily in the past. But this year, people have mentioned the fires already. I think in my district alone, we've lost, I would say, almost 40% of my wilderness area is actually burned this year in the fire. Over 50% of our district burned. We're going to be very, very busy trying to rehab these areas and restore those areas and get them ready for the public as quickly as we can. And so our hands are going to be pretty tied up on this burn restoration work. So we're going to need volunteers on these trail crews more than ever. And we're going to appreciate our trail crews more than ever. And I used to joke with people when I was just a wilderness ranger that nobody appreciates trail crew members or trail volunteers more than me, because, and so I'll say, and all my wilderness rangers now, because we're constantly walking those trails and we understand what it's like to try to struggle on a trail that's overgrown or hundreds of logs across it, equestrian struggle with big logs blocking. And so you really are what the public, so what you do for us is what the public sees the most of what we accomplish. And so we appreciate that. And then we have special projects. I think Omero really talked a lot about these already. And a lot of these special projects are kind of like one and done kind of days, you know, where maybe a particular forest, a particular manager has a cleanup day of this area, and folks show up and they just help knock it out and have a good day meeting other people with common interests and just picking up the place or whatever that project is for the day. And then Elisa talked about invasive weed surveys. And over the years, we've had other surveys and we'll have more surveys again, you know, where volunteers will come and collect this data for us. And this is super important too, because again, we just don't have the staff to do all this ourselves. And so this would be more of a thing where you become trained and then you find your place on the schedule and you would do multiple days of these kind of surveys and help us collect this information. And trailhead hosting, I'm a little partial to this one myself. And this is, again, this is one that directly impacts me in a lot of my work. And it's kind of what I was talking about already earlier, you know, the importance of educating the public. And I go back to a story and really where I really started to get excited about and really wanting to start trailhead hosting was I made a contact one day in the forest or in the wilderness. And I ran into this group who were breaking the rules. And so they were not excited about me giving them the new information. They didn't understand it. They didn't like what I had to say about it and what they were going to need to do to remedy the problem. And the gentleman got angry with me and said, "Why weren't you at the trailhead to tell me this stuff?" I said, "Well, sir, there's already a kiosk there. There's lots of signs if you were to read those." And he said, "You know what, that is all a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo or whatnot. He used some word like, is above his, comprehension. And the reality is that when folks show up to our trailheads, oftentimes they are bombarded with lots of signs. You folks right now, myself, when I go to a restaurant or someplace in town and you go to the front door and every store has its own system of you've got to call this number, you have to do this. And they have signs plastered everywhere. And I'll have, employees say, hey, didn't you read the sign? Which sign? So I think it becomes very confusing at trailheads for folks. And that really made me think, you know what, I really should, or not me, but somebody should be at that trailhead to interpret that for those folks that are excited to get out on the trail. They're excited for their trip. This particular group had several kids with them, so they're trying just to keep their kids from getting ran over. If there were somebody there at the trailhead right from the very beginning, just to interpret just the main points that what made that area unique or the regulations of that specific place. And these folks would have been more than happy to comply then, rather than me meet them after a 4-mile hike to let them know that their plans were changing. So I know that I couldn't do that because I wouldn't be able to be in the wilderness and I wouldn't be able to restore the areas. I wouldn't be able to make contacts and educate people and keep people from making deeper impacts. And so we put together the Trailhead Hosting Program, and we ran it for a few years, and it was wildly successful. In areas where we had less than 40% compliance with permits, it skyrocketed all of a sudden to like 98% success for permits that day. And the wilderness rangers inside the wilderness were just running into far less and sometimes no regulation non-compliance. And the impacts were much, much, much smaller and fewer apart. So it became a very important and a very useful and a very successful program. And so I know you're all asking, how can I get involved? If this makes a good match for you, and someone else is asking about obligations and commitment. So with the Trailhead Host Program, we ask folks to commit 2 weekends for the summer. So that's basically 2 weekends in July or August. When we go to the Trailhead Hosting training, there will be a sign-up sheet, and you pick the weekend that works best for you. But there is 1 day of training involved, 4 or 5 hours really. And this year we're going to be doing it in the comfort of your own home, online, right? So it'll be even easier. There won't be travel involved. But during that session, we will ask, if you're interested to commit for those 2 weekends. And that would be Saturday and Sunday from approximately 8 to 4. And then you would either camp in the immediate area, or you could go back home if that's what you want, or you could bring a camper trailer with you, or work out a deal with me. There might be a campground we might be able to set you up with, or the other managers from the other districts. Anyway, the job really is just to educate the public. Like I said, if they don't know the rules, they're not going to follow them. And most people really do want to follow them. And I always tell my employees and my other volunteers that when you get somebody who just doesn't like the Forest Service in general, or they just don't want to follow the rules and they get kind of grouchy about government and, the government can't do anything right, you'll run into those folks. But I always see that as an opportunity to win their hearts and minds and to change their mind, because they have a preconceived idea of what the Forest Service does and what we're asking them to not do or to do. And in most cases, if you're just respectful and empathetic and informative and polite, you can really just debunk, that theory or that fear or that anger maybe that they've pent up. And once they realize, hey, we're not trying to keep them from enjoying their public lands, we're just trying to help them understand how to help us protect this special place, then like I said, they're on board and they want to help. There's really nothing more rewarding than talking to somebody who has this long time held disenchantment with the Forest Service, and then walk away wanting to be on board, or even coming back later and volunteering with us. One thing I really ask, and this is so important, and I heard other people talk about it tonight too, that we are representing the Forest Service, and we need to represent this agency well and professional and in a favorable light. So if you have bad feelings about the Forest Service, or if you just can't get over something from the past, this might not be your avenue of volunteering. This is not your opportunity to air to the public or empathize with the public about how much you also distrust or dislike us. We really need folks to be representing us in a favorable light, and helping folks understand our mission, so they'll be on board with the mission. So I feel like I've pretty much covered everything. Lisa, what do you think?
I think you did an awesome job. Yeah, so Eric talked a lot about those direct service opportunities, going out with a trail crew of ours, those one-off projects. Those are going to be in better impact this year. We do have one of our wilderness rangers on the McKenzie district who said, hey, when I have crews going out, if I have opening for volunteers, can I just put those in better impact and have volunteers go out with the Forest Service crew? And I was like, heck yeah, I bet folks are going to be excited about that. And then also the trailhead hosting program that we're doing with Eric, that is going to be helping with the Central Cascade wilderness permits at some of those trailheads. In addition, if you wanted to volunteer with some partnership organizations, of course, the Backcountry Horsemen of America, who Becky is here with, do a ton of work in our wilderness areas and to keep those open. The PCTA is another great group. And then we also have, based out of Bend, the Friends of the Central Cascade Wilderness. And they do a lot of really cool work with boundary signs and trail signs. They make them on a CNC machine, and then they go and they install them. And it's a lot of fun to go out with those guys. And they're also using the Better Impact system. So really easy once you get used to the system. We've all kind of adapted to it to make it easier for our volunteers. And so with that, I think I already chatted about those volunteer permits. The 40 hours this year in support of wilderness areas would get you that award permit for next year that would allow you to go in on your day off. When you are volunteering with a crew in the wilderness, your crew leader will have a working permit for the day. And with that, any wilderness volunteer questions? I know this was our most popular room. I see no questions. You did such a good job, Eric.
Oh, thank you very much. Something that you just brought up, Elisa, with the wilderness permit that would allow you to enter the wilderness next year without having to get the limited to get the permits per trip that you go on online. It would be for you and one guest with yourself. This is a huge advantage because I don't know how much, and we don't have time to go through the new permit system in the moment, but this is a really big advantage to you. And back to trailhead hosting, you could very easily get between the 2 weekends and your training, you almost have 40 hours. So you throw a day of trail work in there, boom, you got it.
Awesome. Okay, well, if you do have any questions about that, I saw Eric through his email in the chat, and you can send questions to me or Eric or to volunteer@cascadevols.org, and we can get those questions answered for you about wilderness volunteer opportunities. So thank you so much, Jason, for hanging on. Our last, what was gonna be a breakout room, but now we're all in here together and I love it, is Heritage. And so Jason is gonna talk to us about Heritage volunteer opportunities.
Hey, thanks, Al. Yeah, thanks everyone. Everyone's doing a great job, some good stuff. I'm definitely even learning some things, and that's always a beautiful thing. So my name is Jason McIntyre. I'm the Heritage Program Manager for the Willamette National Forest. Sometimes people wonder what that title is, generally also known as the Forest Archaeologist. Heritage has to do with working with historic properties, archaeological sites, or cultural resources, all those words we kind of interchange together. So the forest has been, as Omero said, and a couple other speakers, the Forest Service came about, in 1905. In 1906, we had our very first act known as the Antiquities Act, was for the preservation and protection of cultural resources. Through the years, in the 30s, we had another couple of acts, and then in the 60s, another couple, and most recently, the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act, which mandates the Forest Service to have a heritage program. This program is intended to preserve and protect cultural resources of all kinds on the landscape, provide the public with opportunities to experience them, provide for interpretation, as Sarah mentioned, and as well as a lot of our work feeds into management practices on the natural resource side, as Omero pointed out. You know, we really enjoy, and one reason I do the job, enjoy that discovery. And I think that's what all of us love to do and experience in our forest, whether it's, you know, discovering the various birds out there in your ecosystem, or discovering kind of an old cabin that you find, and you just start wondering about the history of, you know, how that cabin came to be and the settlers there. And, you know, and even prehistoric times, you start coming across different, even patches, you know, certain patches. It's like, whoa, what's this patch of huckleberry doing here? You know, these were resources on the land that were harvested and that sustained, you know, various Indian tribal bands, various, you know, community members. So to me, I think that's a huge thing and important in what we do and getting it out there. We can be secretive on telling you where that stuff is, because that too is law, that we can't just provide that information. And again, that's, I think, why we want you to get out there and just enjoy it, find stuff, and leave stuff that you find behind for someone else to have that experience too of discovery. That's a huge thing with us. Pick it up, enjoy it, look at pieces, you know, but, you know, put them back down. Don't deface things. Obviously, graffiti on some stuff, we have to then go out and mitigate that, and that is costly. But that is also where volunteers can come in. Currently on the Willamette, some of the opportunities that we have are definitely through the Cascade Volunteer Program. And what Sarah was just talking is the Santiam Lodge, or I'm coming to that one. The Santiam Wagon Road Interpretive Project. And I think that's going to be a great opportunity for folks to get out there and get familiar with the landscape and understand, you know, the development of this region of Oregon, you know, since European settlers. It's really interesting, fascinating. I mean, just today we just jump in our cars and we just go down the road, and we don't think about getting A to B and kind of what that really what that amounted to back in the day. So I think that's a great opportunity to get involved with that. I'm trying to develop some other kind of maybe smaller, singular one-off projects that we could, you know, enlist your help with, whether it's some curation of some, you know, collections, whether those collections are physical artifacts or record collections, various things like that. Another opportunity for you are other partnership organizations. There's a few different ones. The Friends of Fish Lake, the Fish Lake Historic Site was a remount station, which is actually located just off the Santiam Wagon Road. It's a great facility. We have a friends group who's been doing a lot of work out there and kind of rejuvenating the buildings and trying to get some good work going on and turn it into a bit of a education center for kind of the old ways we used to do stuff. There's an old blacksmith shop, and we haven't instituted actual learning practices yet, but we're trying to get there in how they used to do different trades like that. There's also the Sand Mountain Society. They've been huge on our forest for, you know, several decades now, and they do a lot of reconstruction and preservation and protection of various lookouts and other historic structures across this forest and across the region. You can find them in a lot of different places too. So if you live on the outskirts or want to venture off our forest too, there's some opportunity there for you. And another great opportunity is the Friends of the Santiam Pass Ski Lodge. It's a fairly new endeavor, a couple years it's been going. Some folks are trying to really restore this lodge. It was in operation for about 70, 80 years. It hasn't been in operation for, oh gee, how long has it been since? I was gonna say, was it 85? I think 85, but anyway, the lodge just kind of fell into disrepair and we're trying to rejuvenate it, get it back to its once glory and try to use it for different events. And I think it's a good stopping point for people on the Pacific Crest Trail. Pass is near there. I think it's kind of a neat touch of history. So there's a few different opportunities for you there, whether, you know, through the CVs or through some of these other or external partnerships. But I think I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions, comments. I don't see anything on the chat on this end. I don't know, Al. Sometimes the chat, you might have a different chat box maybe.
No, I think you just did such a good job explaining all of the heritage opportunities. Everyone's ready to just Indiana Jones out there with you in the forest.
That's right. That's what we're known for.
All right, great. Well, with that, we will move on to kind of the closing remarks portion. I think we did have a few slides here, Erica. If you could pull those up for us. Thank you again, Jason, and thank you to everybody who led our non-breakout rooms. It was a little bit of a last-minute shift, but the bright side is that we were able to record this entire session for everyone who wasn't able to come. So next steps to register in Better Impact. Like I said, I have an email drafted. I'm going to send that email out to you. It'll have the link that takes you straight to the volunteer application. You'll be prompted to make a username password first. Then you'll be directed to the application itself. And it takes about 10 minutes to fill out. After that, we'll have a volunteer reach back out to you, a volunteer coordinator rather. It'll probably be Erica, who will be chatting with you about your interests, and then she'll help you fill out that volunteer application, that individual agreement with you in the forest if you're interested in volunteering with us. And she can also connect you to different organizations that use Better Impact as well, like Becky's organization, the Backcountry Horsemen. We can get you where you need to go. Volunteer training, a lot of our groups offer that pre-season, so we can get you connected with that if you are interested in that skills college for trail stewardship or for the invasive weeds. All of these programs, a lot of them have training, so just indicating that you're interested in it on your application as you're filling it out is the best way for us to know, because we see that and we filter by that when we're sending out those email notices for trainings. Then the next thing you'll do is whenever you are on our website, so after you've done your application, you're in Better Impact, you can always, this is a picture on the right-hand side here of our website, you go to volunteer resources, volunteer login, that'll take you straight to the Better Impact portal. And from there, you'll be able to view the opportunity calendar, to sign up for events, to email me, all kinds of stuff. You're able to kind of track your certifications that are expiring. So there are a lot of things to be had on there, and we do have some learning modules on there as well for specific things. So if that is all we have tonight, I think next slide, Erica, should be that, yes, that thank you slide. It's the end of the night. Thank you everybody so much for your time. Our contact information is up here. We really appreciate all of you coming out and joining us tonight. And contact us if there are any questions at all. And I'll make sure when I send out that email in the next 30 minutes or so, that all the folks who were presenting tonight, their emails are on there as well. So if you wanted to connect with them about specific volunteer opportunities, that you can. All right, and with that, I will say thank you and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.